My name is January Makamba, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Tanzania, and I have the privilege to co-chair this session with my hero to my daughter, and hero to many young women in Africa, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, Chair of the Elders and former President of Ireland. Thank you for being with us. And I've made sure to take a picture with her, because if I told my daughter that I co-chaired with her, she will not believe it. So I have a photo with her. So we in the morning, we were inspired by our leaders. So we got the politics right of this matter, and we got some money. This afternoon, we are talking about policy, because that also has to work. Before we get into that, I have a small exercise that I want to ask. We just had lunch. How many people know the kind of fuel that was used to cook that lunch? Charcoal, firewood, LPG, electricity, natural gas. It's likely that we don't know. But in Africa, we almost always know. And partly because the smell of that fuel, you find it in the food. You know? Almost always. That smoke, you can smell it in the rice or in the ugali, we call it in Tanzania. And not only that, the person who has been in the kitchen, you can immediately know she or he was in the kitchen, because the clothes, the hair, always smell the smoke. That's the reality of cooking in rural Africa today. So we have a task now to talk about policy. And with that, we have two distinguished panels led by two distinguished moderators. The first panel will be led by the famous and our friend and brother who do not need introduction, Mr. Mo Ibrahim. And the second panel will be moderated by our sister, Sheila Opara Ocha. The first panel will be about policies. What kind of policies are enabling or should enable the access of clean cooking solutions? And how do we put these policies in place? How do we maintain them? How do we make them work? The second panel will talk about the integration and mainstreaming of these policies into broader national agenda. As we know, clean cooking is cross-cutting, and therefore policy design has to be in keeping with that reality. So the second panel will deal with that, and the first panel will deal with policies and how to put them in place. So now, before I welcome the first moderator for the first panel, it's my honor and privilege to welcome Her Excellency Mary Robinson as co-chair, also to give her opening remarks. Please give her a hand of applause.
Oops. Thank you very much, Mr. Makamba, dear co-chair. You are doing your bit, as in the program. You have introduced and explained the two panels and the distinguished moderators of those panels. I'm kind of completely cheating because I was told I could come up and speak now rather than wait and try and sum up what everybody else will be saying in their panels. I really wanted to express, on behalf of the elders that I have the honor currently to chair, who were brought together by Nelson Mandela in 2007, how pleased my sister elder, Graça Machel, and myself are to be here. Graça will speak in the second panel. But I also wanted to say a few words about why this is so important and what we're doing here. And we have to remember that we're on the eve of seeing the full impacts of a climate and nature crisis, which could make it difficult for many, many people to have a future. It's as bad as that. The scientists are clear. We have just a few years to turn a whole system round, and we're not really on course. But we are on the cusp of that clean energy, much healthier, much safer, much fairer, much better world. We're on the cusp. We're actually moving, and we're moving faster, but we're not moving nearly fast enough for the science. And therefore, initiatives like this are extremely important because we need momentum. In particular, as has been said so eloquently this morning by our 4 co-chairs, we're shining a light on a very neglected area which shouldn't be neglected. The fact that 900 million women in Africa still cook on dirty cooking. That should not be tolerated in the 21st century. And to hear that it only requires 4 billion a year and 300 million being taken out each year for the next few years, isn't that very doable? And we did get momentum this morning. We got momentum about new money apparently coming in. I think we need to know exactly what kind of new money and exactly, how it will be spent, etc. We have to test everything these days because there are so many times when promises are made and not fulfilled. I'm an elder. I'm speaking the truth to power. We have to make sure. So that's the first thing. And we see the enthusiasm of wanting in so many different ways. The elders are very clear that the main momentum we want to see is from women themselves being supported to make the difference, being supported to bring to their communities the solutions. One of our elders who passed away a couple of years ago was Ela Bhatt. She founded the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, 2.9 million women. They are doing carbon credits because they have so many working in tar sands with diesel who switched to solar that they were able to claim carbon credits. Now they also have waste pickers who are safe inside in big premises that I visited in January, huge numbers of them, collecting, plastic, cardboard, bottles, etc., and putting them into containers and moving them along to the next stage, etc. In other words, heavy recycling of huge amounts of waste, taking it all out of the system. They can't get climate credits at the moment. And, I think we have to imagine things in this conference. We have to imagine that Africa has a carbon market. Think of the difference that would make. A fair carbon market as opposed to the unfair carbon pricing at the moment. We have to think about where we need to be very, very soon, not kind of incremental changes. And so, when we talk about just transition, we talk about 2 things. We talk about a transition out of fossil fuel, which is causing the emissions, which is harming the planet, which we've promised to now at COP28, have a just and equitable transition out of fossil fuel. That means resources for the workers and their communities that are affected by this. That means money. We see it with the JETPs in developing countries, but we also need to see it more in the developed part of the world. We should be moving more quickly because we're doing the right things of incentivizing getting out of fossil fuel with resources, with just transitions. Then we have to have a just transition in, which is the just transition in, and the way I describe it is into affordable, clean energy. But in this context of Africa, I'm reminded that we need to say affordable, cleaner energy. Cleaner for a transition. Cleaner for a transition energy. And then we have this safer world staying at or below 1.5. And I'm really aware there is a sense of excitement and momentum. We've got to keep this up. We've got to work unbelievably hard in this transition. And if we can use Africa as an example of really moving as Africa is prepared to and is trying to move and has to get much more support and incentives to do it, we will get over that cusp and into that healthier, better, safer, cleaner world where we will gift to our children and grandchildren that in those years that mattered, which is the next 6 years, if we don't do it in the next 6 years, everything will be exacerbated and so much worse. So we've everything to work for, everything to unite for, everything to collaborate for, everything to make sure we sustain this momentum, build on it, and come out of here with the strongest possible messaging about clean cooking being at the center of the situation, not on the margins and not half forgotten, and think at the very center of prioritizing this new world we're working towards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Spoke like the elder with wisdom and clarity. And in Africa, the elder's world is not up for debate. So this is it. Now it's my privilege to welcome the first panel and the first moderator to welcome the first panel, Mo Ibrahim. Please welcome to the stage.
Well, good evening, everybody. The good news, of course, is we raised the money. That's done. The bad news is we're running out of time. I've been told that we are really 40 minutes over time. So we have to reduce the amount of minutes allocated to every one of us. So if you don't mind, we all gonna speak from our seats. We don't need to go and come back. And there is always introduction of who is the speaker is, so allow me not to waste time. Okay, this session really is about learning from each other. What have we done in our countries which is helpful to really pass on to other people? And if we can allocate to everybody 3 minutes maybe will be enough. Instead of 4 minutes, I'll be really grateful. And there is a prize for whoever do it in 2 minutes, okay? Right, so let me start really with our friend from Senegal, Mr. Biram, please, Minister of Petroleum, go ahead.
Alors,
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to you, the elder. So let's not waste time. This morning, we had the diagnosis. 900 million people do not have access to clean cooking, and 3.7 million people, 600,000 of whom in Africa, die of respiratory diseases. And there's also the effect on biodiversity with the forests disappearing. The gender issue has also been discussed because we looked at all aspects this morning, but there's one thing we didn't say. Women and children are those who suffer most. And that is what we also see in Senegal, and that is why my country is developing a program to find answers to the question. We have a biodigesters program, 27,000 by 2030 devices, and we have 3,000, and we also want to cover 800,000 households per year. And then there is also the introduction of butane started in 2014, and what we want is to ensure sustainably that there should be domestic fuel whilst maintaining forests, the environment, agricultural biodiversity, forest biodiversity, and health. And the main objective here is democratization, making access to these tools for clean cooking, giving access to all. So we heard the funding proposals. Well, we need to find a way to shorten lead times because there is this one big issue, bureaucracy, which takes time, during which women are still gathering wood in the forests. Children also, and they're not going to school, and people are still breathing these toxic fumes, whilst we ask a state for a guarantee for this or that paper. And we all are well aware that the situation is urgent. We mustn't rush in headlong, but we have to be pragmatic and therefore reduce lead times for treatment so that results should be tangible very soon.
The time, I'm grateful for that. And may I ask my sister from Uganda now, what kind of policies or actions Uganda did to help?
Thank you very much. Let me add my voice to those who appreciated the organizers of this very important summit. And I also appreciate the morning session, which was ignited by renewed energy. Of course, the first question we must ask ourselves is as to why people choose to cook using dirty source of fuel. Is it by choice? The issue is there are two. One is availability of the alternative, and two, the affordability. So the policies that Uganda has come up with target those two. One of them are the tax incentives that we give those who import stoves, energy-saving stoves. We removed taxes on LPG. We removed taxes on denatured ethanol. So removing taxes means that those gadgets, those cooking stoves will be affordable. The second one is the introduction of the electricity cooking tariff to make those who have gotten access to electricity afford it. We are targeting the middle class, those who are between 80 to 140 units. And we are introducing special meters that will have chips to allow us monitor so that the clean cooking tariff, special tariff, is not abused. The third one is that Uganda is running a dedicated LPG promotion. People fear to use gas, even those who can afford to use it. So we dedicated this. We are working with our partners. You heard the CEO Total mention the kind of investment they've done in Uganda. We are developing our LPG. We are expecting 100,000 tons of gas from Tilenga, which is developed by Total, and Sinopec is also developing. But we shall also receive about 200,000 tons of gas from our refinery, which we are developing. So, and I know that my colleague, Honorable January, is aware of our engagement with Tanzania on LNG. A steering committee is established. I think the feasibility study is about to be started where we shall receive gas from Tanzania. That is our gas as East Africa. So that will help us. The other one is that we have put in place and we are continuing to improve technical standards. I think it was the Vitor representative this morning who talked about standards, who talked about quality. So we have that in place. And we are establishing a clean cooking unit in my ministry, and I must pause here and thank the UK government for the 5 million euros that they have put in place so that we can have a strong unit in my ministry that will reach out to institutions to be guided how to use biogas. So there are policies and regulations put in place in Uganda, and we are ready to implement. I was excited by the announcements this morning. We shall make sure that we have the projects to partake of the resources that have been mobilized. We shall not let down our partners who have offered money to make sure that we transit from smoke, from dirty cooking facilities to clean cooking facilities. There are mega plans for energy transition that will require investment in energy generation and distribution so that people get access to this clean energy, clean electricity, and Uganda brags of having hydropower in our generation mix, almost in 94% clean energy, but we are not yet there to reach out to every person who wants to use it. So we have a mega plan on electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. I want to thank you.
Thank you, sister. Right, can I ask my brother then from Madagascar, Olivier? Yeah, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le...
Thank you very much, moderator. Good afternoon to you all. Welcome to this wonderful session on clean cooking in general. Now, regarding Madagascar in particular, maybe I could give you some figures just to give you an idea of what awaits us. Madagascar, 10 million hectares of forests, and we are losing 100,000 hectares every year, and 1/3 of that for cooking. Over 90% of households in Madagascar still use charcoal and wood. This means that the challenge for us is enormous in terms of clean cooking, but more generally speaking, in terms of energy. All the clean cooking possibilities that have been mentioned here, which we all know, can be transported, adapted, and can be implemented in our country. Now, maybe some more figures. Let us take LPG. 0.4 kilos per inhabitant per year. We could multiply this figure by 15 or 20. So for some month now, the government has decided to move ahead and work on clean cooking. And we are currently finalizing the law on bioenergy. And soon, a task force, an interministerial task force, will be operational, looking into clean cooking from all angles and looking at all solutions, improved cookers, LPG, bioethanol, etc., etc. So we'll be drawing up a number of measures, including tax measures in this area, with our usual financial and technical partners, and more specifically with the private sector, because we think that if we are to prevail, we have to work together. I have knowledge of a study into LPG, which dates back some 20 years, and I think everybody is aware of it. LPG's flexibility, availability, and yet it's a product that hasn't really penetrated. Likewise, bioethanol. There are already some initiatives, but they need to be boosted. Madagascar is facing a number of energy challenges. Electricity is at 30% accessible, and we want to go up to 70%. The country, in any event, will welcome all initiatives from our traditional technical and financial partners, but also from the private sector, in order to move ahead with all these clean cooking solutions, in order to give households, and in particular women and children, better cooking facilities, something which is available and affordable within the overall development we are working on for our country. Thank you.
And I'm really grateful that our friends, the ministers here, are keeping to the time, well disciplined. Excellent. Now from Malawi, we have our brother Michael. Tell us something about what's going on in Malawi.
Thank you very much. I will not repeat what my colleagues have said. Much of that I agree, but allow me to focus on a few areas which have not been touched. The question is not academic, is practical. So let me share from experience in Malawi. Policies and regulations that have proven to be effective in advancing or making sure that clean cooking is achieved is one where it is people-centered. Policies that are people-centered are effective. For example, let's look at clean cooking. What does that terminology, clean cooking, mean in my vernacular? In English, it's very easy, clean cooking, you understand it. But when you take it in the context of my vernacular in Malawi, in the village, clean cooking, introduce that concept. The question that might come would be, you mean mine has been dirty cooking? So, wedding, designing of messages to the people so that they can buy in is very critical. So, the person that we are targeting in the village should be at the center of the program. We are also looking at issues of carbon credits. These stoves will be creating carbon credits. There should be transparency and accountability. In Malawi, for example, over 97% of people use firewood for cooking. Now, for them to start using clean energy or cooking stoves, we have to have messages which have been clearly designed. What I'm trying to underscore is that knowledge management is very, very critical for such a program to be effective. Because many times we focus on the outsider, the investor, the development partner. How should we tailor this policy so that he should be happy? We should not forget the person, the beneficiary, who is going to be in the village, who may not be able to read and write. So, from Malawi's perspective, people-centeredness is very critical. critical diagnosis of a problem should focus on the individual so that the prescription should be targeted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good. Excellent. And well, actually, you're going to win the contest here of the shortest statement. So we'll see, unless maybe we have different. Now, Dr. Janine, is it Janine? Jenda. Okay. No, sorry, Jeanne d'Arc. Yeah, sorry. From Rwanda. Now, Rwanda is always an interesting country, coming with new ideas. What new ideas you have? Any new policies there we can make use of it in other countries? Because see, most of these guys is still in the planning phase. Yes?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this summit and tell them that Rwanda, as other countries that spoke before me, has policies, strategies, regulations, ministerial regulations, but those policies alone require enabling factors to be implemented, such as subsidies, schemes, partnership with private sector, because government alone cannot end this problem of unclean cooking. So the policies are there. For instance, a clean cooking result-based financing subsidy scheme that is under the Rwanda Development Bank, which is a private bank, in partnership with Rwanda Energy Group. It expects to trigger at least 25% female-headed household to benefit from access to clean cooking technologies. And of course, building on existing green financing mechanisms, we have created Ireme Invest, which is a branch of Rwanda Green Fund to fund private sector into creation of clean cooking and other green jobs. And we have established a state-of-art facilities that ensure minimum standards are met in distributing and the use of clean cooking technologies. So Rwanda launched and currently uses a testing laboratory for all cook stoves distributed in the country for use in the household. And different strategies for investment are generated. And of course, we have created incentives for private sector to invest in clean cooking. There are multiple incentives to support entrepreneurs, women cooperatives, youth cooperatives, to make sure no family, no household is left without having clean cooking technology. And the journey is still long. We will walk that journey with private sector and the civil society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeanne d'Arc. Wonderful. Thank you. Now we have our brother from India, Praveen.
Praveen.
Yeah, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and the dignitaries on the dais. These 2 pages are actually the 8th version of my speaking points. That is because of the 3 minutes barrier, and I can see that ticker going on. For India and such a huge country and such a huge scheme, very difficult. 5 minutes. So, for such a huge scheme and the parameters which enable that scheme to be successful, hugely successful, I think I would like to speak in slightly detail, but I'll be again try to be brief and adhere to these elements. In Hindi, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana means Prime Minister's Ujjwala is actually brighten something, and scheme is Yojana. Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana actually meant bringing brightness to the households. So with this scheme, which actually provided free LPG cylinders and connections and first free refill, it actually brightened the poor and deprived households by providing them access to LPG. Although we had started the LPG as a cooking fuel in 1960s, but till 2014, only about 56% of the India's households had this cooking fuel available and accessible to them. Remaining households, as we have discussed, they were using all cow dung, wood, charcoal, etc. Now, LPG was the cooking fuel for choice, as everyone has already highlighted. And in that context, PMUY scheme was launched in May 2016 by the Honorable Prime Minister. And the idea was to provide access of LPG to all the poor households. Now, three major hindrances have been there across the African countries. That was the affordability of the connection and refills, need for LPG distribution channels till the last mile, and requisite behavioral change, because many of the food items which we cook, we felt that the using charcoal or kerosene could be better. So this behavioral change was needed. Under this scheme, which I just mentioned, one adult woman of every poor household is eligible for a free LPG connection together with first free refill. The upfront charges of about $50 were borne by the central government and by the national oil marketing companies. Two of them are here, and one of the chairman of IOC is actually chairman of World LPG Association also. So LPG was very important for us, and then they shared the burden with the central government. The selection of the households was done from the socio-economic caste census, and extensive campaigns for the behavioral change were carried out. They were called Ujjwala Panchayats, and they were carried across the country. India currently has 325 million LPG connections, out of which over 100 million connections have been provided under the PMUY scheme. We have reached near saturation as far as LPG access is concerned. Now, out of this 100 million, 80% of the connections are in the rural areas. The average consumption of the PMUY households has also gone up from 3 per year to 4 cylinders per year. When I say cylinder, it's actually 14.2 kg LPG cylinder. Now, PMUY scheme was hugely successful on account of three main parameters. One was the robust IT systems of the oil marketing companies, internet connectivity, and everyone had a mobile phone, by and large, by that time. Then availability of a biometrics-based unique identification number that was called Aadhaar, and that was also started in 2014. Then everyone also had the bank balance so as to transfer the subsidies directly to the beneficiaries' accounts. And that scheme was called Jan Dhan Yojana. That was again started in 2014. The infrastructure got upgraded hugely by the oil marketing companies. I'll just not go into the number, but India is 60% dependent on LPG. The import terminals increased from 11 to 21, pipelines from 2,300 kilometers to 5,500. And in all infrastructure, the facilities were kind of improved a lot. The commitment at the highest level was exemplary, and that commitment actually led us through, and the connections from 0 to 100 million, they were possible within 6-7 years, even earlier. Many of the targets were achieved earlier. Now, for replicating, we also saved $10 billion when we talk about subsidies. When we started transferring the subsidies directly to the bank accounts of the beneficiaries, the leakages and the deduplication, they were done. Leakages were stopped, and we saved about $10 billion under this DBTL, Direct Benefit Transfer Scheme. Now, can it be replicated, and how can this be replicated, the LPG penetration and near saturation? We would offer the exchange of ideas and people with Africa and with African countries, those who would be interested in LPG as the cooking medium, and through which could be coordinated by IA. The funding for making LPG affordable and creating robust infrastructure could come from the national governments and oil companies. We saw lots of commitments today, so that shouldn't be a problem. huge savings in the form of carbon credits. They have been estimated. This could be utilized for this funding. In the end, I would like to say, as our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, has said that future depends on what we do in the present. And accordingly, we all need to play our part in this noble cause of providing access to clean cooking fuel and the empowerment of women. Thank you, everyone.
No, this is interesting, really. And can I just ask you one quick question? How did you help people acquire the first cylinder? Because I think the investment there, you need to pay $30, $40. How to buy the first cylinder? Did you subsidize?
First,
Did you?
the PMUY scheme had 3-4 versions. The first cylinder, the connection charges were about, say, $20. They were provided by the central government in the form of grants. So we gave it to the oil marketing companies, and the scheme was run by the national oil companies, which is Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, and Hindustan Petroleum. Two of the CMDs are here.
Okay.
And the first cylinder was given as a loan, which we kind of, by and large, it was not returned. And in the current scheme, the first cylinder, the first refill is also provided to them, including hose pipe and everything.
Okay. But it seems to me that also central to your project is the ID, the identity, the digital identity of people, which is something we're struggling with in Africa. Everybody needs to have an identity. Half our people don't have identity. We need to look into that issue, because that we cannot provide any subsidy scheme. We cannot even have credible election if we don't have proper identity for every citizen. Correct? I have silence.
I also, I just to add to what you have said, that the consumption actually had come down because of the high prices, and volatility was mentioned in the first session. So government has started providing $4 per cylinder. So the cost of the cylinder is about $10 refill.
Okay.
$4 comes as a targeted subsidy, which the government pays from its own pocket for sustained usage of LPG, and the change shouldn't be kind of a temporary change.
Yeah, these issues we need to consider practical issues in how to handle that. Before we finish this session, I ask you for two things. First, can you give a big hand for our wonderful ministers here? Thank you very much. And secondly, before you leave, I want to invite a representative of Sahara Corporation, who I'm told want to make an announcement. She, not he, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies. My name is Ijoma Isiche. I'm representing the Sahara Group. Sahara Group is an international oil and gas company with presence in over 42 countries globally. We're present in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. And today we want to reaffirm our commitment in clean energy globally to meet the SDG 7 goal by 2030. In the last 2 years, we've invested over $100 million in the infrastructure for clean energy. To that end, we constructed 2 LPG vessels, and in the next 6 years, we're looking to commit and invest approximately $800 million towards construction of 6 LPG carriers, as well as storage facilities in the sub-Saharan region areas. Thank you very much, IEA, for the opportunity to confirm our commitment, and we look forward to more deliberations on this. Thank you.
Can I invite the next chair, please?
So I'm sitting in for Minister Makamba, who was to leave. We now invite our next moderator for the next topic, who is Sheila Operacha, the Director of Energy and Networks. Please welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd also like to invite my panelists to come and join me here on the stage. You're most welcome. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start by just thanking the co-chairs for their insightful introductions to this panel discussion. My dear friend and colleague, Dr. Kandu Mkela, said this morning that today was an emotional day for those of us who do not care to admit how long we have been advocating for clean cooking. The reason being that it has been a long time coming to see the political and executive level commitment and traction that we saw this morning on this very important topic of clean cooking and its contribution to Africa's sustainable energy for all agenda. It was indeed, therefore, very important that we heard from the previous panel our ministers, our distinguished ministers, deliberating and sharing with us their perspectives and their commitments from their different country policy development experiences. I'm deeply honored to be able to take this discussion forward on the critical role of enabling policies and regulations in advancing clean cooking and addressing the challenges of making clean cooking an African policy priority. We're privileged to hear today from leading voices of decision makers in their own rights on how to further reinforce these important national efforts to advance clean cooking and explore the role that the international community can play in elevating this progress. Like my previous moderator had said, time is of the essence. We're quite delayed. So while I'd welcome my distinguished panels to this discussion, I'd also kindly seek your compliance to the 3 minutes so that we all have an opportunity to, all our speakers have an opportunity to speak and we can move further with the agenda. I thank you for your indulgence. To begin with, I'd like to start the conversation with you, Stephanie Imbo, the Special Envoy for New Climate Economy from the Democratic Republic of Congo, our neighbor. I'm from Zambia, one of my many countries. So in this esteemed role and position that you play, what strategies do you recommend for our African leaders and governments that spoke here today to effectively enhance local policy experiences and incorporate clean cooking into the broader social, economic, and environmental agendas?
Thank you very much for your invitation. My role is simple. I'm the Special Envoy for New Climate Economy. I'm the opposite of what people are doing in the climate, telling people what you shouldn't do. Don't do this, don't drive a car, don't do this, don't do that. My role is to tell you and to advise the president what we could do to make the fight against climate change an opportunity of business, opportunity of innovation by the key driver, which is the carbon credit. So we have our resources, which is we have forests, natural big sinker of COD. And the president's vision is to make zero tolerance on pollution at the atmosphere. So no one COD of pollution atmosphere have to be a cost versus carbon credits for companies who are polluting. Clean cooking is tell us a lot about the public health, so we need to tackle the situation for the public health. But we also need to rephrase our local law to empower the mitigation of in our country. They call the avoidance on carbon credit. That can raise more money. So my role here is to tell to the African fellow, but also Western countries, their company can buy carbon, they can open a carbon stock market for entrepreneurs in Africa who are innovating in the clean cooking, who are innovating in recycling, and they can generate carbon credit through this business. So this is how we are doing it in the DRC. But yet, for not any price. We need to raise the price of our carbon credit to have this fungibility with the European market, US, and China, and all those regulated markets, which is close to us. So if we can lobby on to open regulated markets and to frame our entrepreneur in clean cooking in our continent, we will save the world, but we save ourselves. Also, in our country, in the DRC, we create the so-called the initiative of change of mentality. We need to change on mentality of African women who used to know that cooking with charcoal, the food is tastier than when you use any other clean cooking. So it's a kind of culture we need to change in our country. We need to raise the issue of changing culture, but to frame our local entrepreneur in that area, but mostly to make those who are polluting pay for their pollution emission. Thank you.
Ms. Stephanie, thank you so much for your comments, bringing the carbon market to Africa. And of course, we know from DRC, you have a wonderful carbon sink there with the equatorial forest. Thank you very much for those comments. My next question is to Ms. Carla Montesi, Director for Green Deal and Digital Agenda from the European Commission. Madam Carla, from the perspective of the European Commission, how can the international community best collaborate with its national and regional partners to support African countries in the development and implementation of their clean cooking agenda? And more specifically, what support and how can this support ensure an efficient regional and intercontinental collaboration? The floor is.
Many thanks. Many thanks for the question. And once again, I wanted to take the opportunity to congratulate all the key co-chairs for organizing this summit on this very, very important matter. Let me start with your question about the engagement of the European Union, as was mentioned already this morning by the Vice President Šefčovič. The European Union considering this clean cooking really as a priority, and we are engaged with a package of 400 million in specific project and the program at the national level and the regional level to support the development of the clean cooking. So it's a clear priority, and we believe on this priority for all the reasons that were explained during all this day. Now, our approach is a multidimensional approach. So it's important, you mentioned different action, it's important to have action where we use grants for technical assistance and capacity building, but also financial investment to support the private sector that can play an important and huge role, as we have listened this morning in the different panel. Now, what we consider it is very important in order to succeed in this domain, that we have a clearly strategy at the country level. It was already mentioned that it's important that the clean cooking appear also in the priority of a development plan of the country, or it will be seen as a priority in the national determined contribution in the strategy. But what is also very important that these formal commitments are translated, are accompanied also by specific strategy, action plan that will be implemented at the country level with results very well identified and also with responsible. The difficulties of the clean cooking priority is that, in fact, it's something that concerns different ministries, different organizations, and from the health ministry to the energy to the environment. So sometimes at the level of a country or at the level of a region, we miss what is the clear actor that will take the responsibility to move from a political engagement to a strong action plan to implement the objective. So what is important is to have clear responsibility for developing the strategy and a multidimensional approach that allow to put together all the different instruments that allow a country or a region or the international organization to succeed in this matter.
Thank you very much for that. So from the politics to the policies to the implementation on the ground with very clear roadmaps. Thank you very much for that, for your intervention. Okay. So my next question will go to Mr. Ihoman Nasi Khalifa, Director General for Energy, Ministry of Mines, Petroleum and Energy of Côte d'Ivoire. Sir, my question to you will take into consideration what we have heard from your development partner, the European Commission, but also from your sister country, DRC. From Côte d'Ivoire's experience, how can governments best advance their local policy efforts and integrate clean cooking into a regional agenda?
Merci. Merci pour votre...
Thank you very much for the question. I'd like to greet all the participants here. Now, this is an important question, indeed. As the government, we are in charge of implementing these policies, and of course, once they have been implemented, we need to make sure we are meeting the objectives we have set. We were presented with the overall picture this morning, the consequences of the use of traditional cooking techniques on health and the very alarming figures for numbers of deaths caused. In Côte d'Ivoire, we have identified a number of obstacles in view of which we have devised effective action plans to overcome these obstacles, so that when it comes to action plans, I'd like to mention, first of all, the strategic development plan to 2030, which is designed to boost our ability to store GPL. We have recently discovered large reserves, which will be very much relevant in this context. Also, there is access to cooking sources of energy and the ability to equip some 500 school canteens so that school children can be freed up from the time seeking fuel wood or cooking wood. And then there is a specific objective to boost our ability to deliver butane across the national territory. There's the National Renewables 2030 plan, which also aims to boost to some 90% the rural population using biogas. And there are other measures which are in the course of development as well. So in the context of all these policies, it's important to emphasize one thing, which is cultural resistance. It is important to enable the population at large to become accustomed to the idea that although adopting new cooking technologies may change the taste of food somewhat, it will be good both for health and for the environment. And then you have the financing costs. We heard about the more than 2 billion of funding today. Nevertheless, we have to ensure that we can reduce the conditions which restrict access to such funding. And I'd like to end with one thing with our lenders. You were mentioning that they support us in funding terms, to think also about training and the way that private companies can contribute to this aspect of rolling out cleaner technologies. I think that's just about what I could say in response to that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalifa, for your very insightful comments, and thank you for highlighting the need for policy measures to support behavioral change for the uptake and adoption of clean cooking. I'd now like to invite Her Excellency Gracia Machel, Deputy Chair of the Elders, Chair of the Board of Gracia Machel Trust, and former Minister of Education of Mozambique to join me in this conversation. As one of Africa's esteemed elders, Your Excellency, from your perspective and from what you've heard from our ministers, not just from the previous panel, but early on the day, how should African governments best progress with their national policy efforts and incorporate clean cooking into their broader social, economic, and environmental agendas?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying I'm wearing two hats here. The first one is Deputy Chair of the Elders, and the second one, someone who is working with a variety of women's networks in Africa. So I'll try to be addressing the two aspects. From the point of view of the elders, I would like to underscore the fact that whether development partners are multilateral, are bilateral, are private sector, are foundations, one, to look at the magnitude of the problem we are talking about, and if we have the 2030 as the goal, then the allocation of resources should correspond to the magnitude of the problem we are addressing. And as we have been told this morning, it is attainable in 6 years. Second, I would like to underscore the fact that we are talking of clean cooking. So everyone has to have in mind who cooks. And in these discussions, we hear talking of policy, we talk of empowering, private sector. My main point is the women themselves. Because at the end of the day, the chain has to go, yes, we need policy, we need private sector, but we need to build the capacity of women themselves so that they don't become simply recipients, but they actively, building the capacity to participate and to absorb the technologies which are being required. So, a gender perspective from the development and allocation of resources globally. Then we come to the country level. We as African women, we are putting on the table consideration that yes, we want to be investors. We want to be entrepreneurs. We want to be managers. And we want to be, of course, the customers, those who use this. So any policy from any government has to have the face of the women equally in the building the capacity of the response. Again, taking into account the magnitude of the problem. We are millions. In each one of our countries, we are millions. So we cannot be seen as a marginal, because government will not succeed without us. The private sector will not succeed without us. So if we are to succeed, we need to bring the women themselves in these different categories I mentioned, the whole of the value chain, to have women participating actively. So I want to make an appeal here. So clean cooking, it is essentially, yes, building capacities, policies, etc. It's about women, African women. Most of them in urban areas, they're very poor, they can't afford. And in rural areas, they're even much more poor, they can't afford. So how do we build the capacity of these millions to make a good use and transform what we call here as an agenda?
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that very powerful contribution. Clean cooking is indeed an African woman's issue, but not just as victims, but it builds on our power and aspirations to really transition our continent to its prosperity and to clean cooking for all. Thank you very much. I'd now like to have my next question for Mr. Stanlake Samkanga, Assistant Executive Director of the World Food Programme. So given the importance that has been highlighted earlier on, but also on this panel, of the interlinkages of clean cooking with other development goals, specifically Sustainable Development Goal, not just Sustainable Development Goal number 7, but many others we've just heard of, number 5 on gender equality. What is the perspective from the World Food Programme as an international intergovernmental organization of how African governments and other development partners can integrate clean cooking into the wider development agenda and best coordinate efforts?
Well, thank you very much for the question. For the United Nations World Food Programme, this is a very important issue. It's an important issue because 418 million children worldwide are in school meals programs. WFP supports 20 million children worldwide, 10.1 million in Africa with school meals programs. Last year in 2023, we supported or handed over to governments 54,000 stoves for the preparation of school meals. So it's a big issue. And traditionally, we have focused on cleaner energy, on fuel-efficient stoves. That's been a big focus of our work, and it's produced some significant reductions in not just carbon emissions, but also in reduction of deforestation and in health benefits. But 2024, as was said earlier, I think can mark a transitional year, really a point of departure. For us, we are now beginning to focus not just on fuel-efficient stoves, but on clean cooking. We now have 2 pilots, one in Lesotho, another one beginning in Tanzania. We're working together with Sea4All, supported by UK FCDO, to look at electronic stoves and electronic cooking, e-cooking. We're also in places like Madagascar. We're working to link that to solar panels so that the electricity that's needed can be affordable, that we look at the scope for rural electric needs, and clean cooking is one of those. From our perspective, we start with the schools, but we also look at the households. In fact, the schools after the households, schools are the biggest opportunity to make a difference in terms of clean cooking. We want to leverage our engagement with the schools to also support clean cooking in households. For the next 3 years, and why I think this can be a year of departure for us, we aim to support 10,000 schools, 5 million children with clean cooking at a cost of about $100 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and remarks. So my last speaker, but definitely not the least, is Mr. Ziyong Zhao, the Deputy to the Director General and Managing Director of the Directorate of Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Industrial Development of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Mrs. Ziyong, my question is similar to your counterpart from the World Food Programme, but more focused on industrial development. So how, in the perspective from UNIDO, can African governments and the international partners integrate clean cooking into their wider development agenda, specifically on industrial development, and can best coordinate efforts?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Yes, I think from UNIDO's perspective, I think the most important dimension of this topic associated with clean cooking in Africa, also has to be with the, local manufacturing. Now, of course, for all the multilateral, bilateral, these donors, they can buy these purchases, stoves from here and there. But for UNIDO, we think that there is critical, importance for this region, really to develop the local capacity to manufacture the stoves. We have initiated some cooperations with some private sector. Not only is they focus on distribution channels, that to also that with partner with local these manufacturers to set up this local manufacturing capacity, that to help to build these kind of facility stoves. Also, in addition to this, we would promote this kind of integrated solution that to address the clean cooking issue under the framework of broad development, maybe a framework of a given country. Taking the example of Tanzania, now we have now start cooperation in the field of clean cooking with support from GEF, the EU, and also OPRI Fund. But our focus, that of course, is that to see whether this intervention should be integrated with UNIDO's overall support to the industrialization strategy of Tanzania government. Now we have a country program on partnerships. Now we basically then, clean cooking is one of the most important initiatives under this overall, this kind of cooperation framework. So now we basically have this close collaboration with a few kind of companies locally, also globally. Then to help them set up this maybe joint venture that to foster this kind of creation of local capacity on manufacturing. In addition to this, also this is important for UNIDO also to focus on this regional, this kind of market. For us, it's really important that we need to take advantage of this Africa Free Trade Zone kind of agreement. Now, I think for this also regional market, we need to work on this, the quality infrastructure, the standards, acceptable to all these kind of players. So this is also one important dimension of UNIDO's intervention in Africa, associated with the Clean Cooking Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contributions. We've come to the end of our panel discussion, and I'm not going to try to summarize, but I think the panel discussion I thought was going to focus on policy. In fact, I think we moved beyond. Our speakers all emphasized the need to really go to implementation. Having proven and scaling up policy measures and implementing those policy measures, from building a carbon market in Africa to the important role that our development partners and the international community can play in offering technical assistance in building capacity and, of course, the financing to saying that really it's what happens on the ground that's important, including behavioral change measures, making sure that this intersects and is linked with other development agendas, be it on food, on poverty, and ensuring that women are really central to driving this agenda, and that this is a regional perspective. It's not just on countries, it's a regional perspective, and we can take advantage of other important initiatives that are taking off in the country, for instance, the Africa Free Trade Zone. Thank you all very much to all our speakers for your excellent comments, and I hope you're going to join me again in thanking them for their very insightful comments. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we would like to inform you that in the interest of time, the next session will be starting in 5 minutes. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, éminentes invités,